Okay, so yeah, so let me continue from, so let me just do a very quick recap. Then there are a couple of things I want to say, prove these things, but also a bit more. So just to save time, I wrote a couple of things. So SLE kappa, the definition is that, so it's like this. So we have this gt dot of z is 2 over gtz minus ut in general. Here we took Brownian motion times square root of kappa. And it starts at z. For every z in the upper half plane union, so we can take z in upper half plane, but we also take, we can take it on the real line, but not at 0, because at 0 you cannot start, w0 is 0. So here w is standard one-dimensional Brownian motion, which looks like this. It's a almost Holder 1/2 curve. It's not quite Holder 1/2. So, and then what is SLE kappa? So when we run this flow, some of the z's, ultimately their trajectories will get absorbed into square root kappa wt. So that is the time when the flow line starting at z hits square root kappa wt. At that point, you cannot develop the ODE anymore. So you have this TZ. Okay, so for some z, TZ may be infinity. That means the flow line is defined for all time. So K sub t is all those z's which have not been absorbed up to time t, and gt is always the conformal map from the complement of that to the upper half plane with the hydrodynamic normalization. And what is SLE kappa? We can call this K sub t, this increasing family of hulls, as SLE kappa. Or, but we also mentioned this theorem of Rohde and Schramm, that there is actually a curve, gamma, such that this kt is actually the filling in of that curve. So what that means is there is a curve, not necessarily simple. It may be like this. It hits itself but does not cause itself. But then at this time, what is the hull? You have to also fill in all the bounded components here. So this is this, and the curve together will be K sub t at time t. So another way to say it is that the complement is the unique unbounded component of upper half plane minus gamma 0 to t. So this is the definition, and then GT will be the conformal map from that. So the existence of the curve is a little bit of a tricky thing. It's not so easy. I indicated a little bit. I thought I will say maybe a little more about that. But then the main results that we want to tell, at least some of the main results we want to tell are this, that when kappa is between 0, there's a phase change in the behavior of SLE kappa. So this gamma is what we will call SLE kappa. Okay, so this is what we will call SLE kappa. For many things, you don't need the existence of curve. You can work with the hulls, but when it exists, why bother? It also makes speaking easier. I mean, to say SLE curve and so on. So when kappa is up to 4, less than equal to 4, this is a simple curve. It looks, it doesn't hit itself. Okay, so this is for kappa less than equal to 4. This is for kappa between 4 and 8. And when kappa is bigger than 8, it is space filling. So that means it hits every single point in the upper half plane union real line actually. So it hits every point. Okay, so these are some, this is one of the basic properties, how kappa affects this. It doesn't yet come to the really probabilistically important questions of what kappa for which discrete random curves and so on. So, okay, that will come later. So, but I thought there may be a little bit of interest in this business of this. One of the points is, okay, why? I mean, so this last time there was a question. So Bisachi asked this question, maybe someone else also did. How, I mean, can we qualitatively see why this kappa makes a difference? Now, I don't have an actual answer to that. But what I want to say is the following. See, in the entire history of Brownian motion, nobody said I will study 2 times Brownian motion. There is absolutely no point. It's exactly the same. Okay, so you get all the properties of 2W from W. It is only when you put it through the nonlinear machinery of the Loeffler evolution that you get some very different looking objects like this SLE kappas. So what that means is that this all the behavior is in the machinery, not in the Brownian motion. Okay, it doesn't have. So it should be possible to see this kind of thing in the deterministic situation without all this Brownian motion business. So that is, in fact, I actually had seen this long time ago, had completely forgotten. So can we see it? But there is one example I did give before. So let's take u of t to be c times square root of t. These are Holder 1/2 curves, almost like Brownian motion. Brownian motion is almost Holder 1/2 with the varying constant c. This looks like the analog of that kappa, right? I mean, so it's a bit like that kappa. But what is happening here? So as c changes, we know that if you take this as the driving function, then the corresponding curve is a straight line, and the angle depends on the constant c. When the constant is very small, when the constant is 0, it is vertical. When the constant goes to plus infinity or minus infinity, it starts slipping to this side or that side. Okay, so this is how it makes change. But you don't see any change in between, right? I mean, it smoothly changes. When c changes between minus infinity and infinity, it just bends. So nothing happens, for example, at c equal to 4 or any other point. I mean, it doesn't look like anything happens here. So how do we see, but what then, how do we explain this with a deterministic type of situation? So there's a different one which I had forgotten, but I want to just mention that. So there's another one which we can look at. So this I'm telling you from, this is a paper of Kager, Nienhuis, and Kadanov. If I had realized, I would have, I mean, if I had known this, I would have done it in the first lecture, but I forgot. So, but it's anyway, okay, I will just mention what happens. So here they consider a different Holder curve, Holder 1/2 curve, which is c times square root 1 minus t. Okay, so this is Holder from the left, but only defined for, if you want, you can extend it, but that doesn't matter. This is all that matters. So let's take a driving function, which is c times square root of 1 minus t. Okay, it is starting at 1 and ending at 0. It doesn't matter. Okay, that doesn't matter. If you want, you subtract a 1 or c here. But so if you, this is also similar to that c times square root t, but here you see a big difference. So in other words, so we are looking at gt dot of z equal to 2 over okay, with g0 of z equal to 0. So let me just do 2 lines of calculation, which is not, I mean, so because okay, in the calculation there is a small point. Okay, so how to solve this? I did not actually show you how to solve this one either. So you can solve that by the same method. But this special case is also important for a reason that I will come to. So how do you solve something like this? So what they do is, so fix some z and set ht equal to gt over square root of 1 minus t. Okay. So I have written down here. So rather than do the calculations, let me just copy what I have here. So for ht, the differential, you can write down the differential equation for ht, which turns out to be ht dot. It is an easy calculation to do. It is something like ht square minus c times ht plus 4 divided by 2 into ht minus c, and then there is also a 1 minus t. This is what you get. So what you do is, now it is kind of separable, right? You can move the h variable to one side and t to the other side. And if you move the h to the other side, you get some linear function of h by a quadratic function of h, so which you can write in the partial fraction form like this. So it turns out to be, so let me write it and then explain what are these. ht minus a minus minus a minus over ht minus a plus dH t is equal to, just let me write, yeah, dHt is equal to dt over, sorry, equal to a plus minus a minus over 2 into 1 minus t dt. Something like this. So it is just a partial fraction expansion of this. So to get the partial fraction expansion, you need to know the roots of this. So a plus minus are what? They are the roots of this equation, x square minus cx plus 4. So they are actually c plus or minus square root of c square minus 16. Right, c square minus 16, yeah, over 2c. Okay, so these are the roots. And a plus, so those are the two roots. And if you do the partial fraction expansion, you get this. So, and then you can now integrate this. That gives you something like a plus log of ht minus a minus a minus log of ht minus a plus. That is what you get when you integrate this. On the other side, if you integrate this, you get, this is negative log of 1 minus t. So you'll get minus of a plus minus a minus 1/2 log of 1 minus t. And then there is a constant which may depend on z, right? So when you put t equal to 0, you get h0 of z is basically z. Sorry, what is it? Yeah, g0 of z is z. So h0 of z is also z because this is 1. So if you put t equal to 0, you get the whole thing with this vanishes when t is 0. So you get whatever is here, a plus log z minus a minus a minus log z minus a plus. Okay, so you don't have to pay attention to all the details. Point is, you can write the solution like this. Of course, this log can be multi-valued. The key difference comes here. The key point is that these roots are real if c is bigger than 4, greater than equal to 4, and complex if c is less than 4. Okay, so the roots are complex if c is less than 4. From this, what you can argue here is that, so can argue, so this log can be multi-valued also. If the roots are real, you can use a single valued logarithm on the upper half plane. But otherwise, you have to use a multi-valued logarithm. But then what it means is the real and imaginary parts are satisfying this. So what one can argue is that, so can argue that gamma t converges as t goes to 1. So what happens at t equal to 1? Gamma t is the corresponding curve. Okay, gamma is the corresponding Loebner curve. Okay, it is actually a curve. Its property is that gt of gamma t will be u of t, right? I mean, that is how the tip of the curve gets mapped to this curve on the real line. So that is how we can, so you put gamma, if you want gt of gamma t to be u of t. So that means ht of gamma t should be constant c, this c. So when you put ht equal to c and solve it, you get what is z, and that z is your gamma t. Okay. So as t goes to 1, you can argue that it goes to one of the roots, whichever is in the upper half plane. Okay, when they are real, both are in upper half plane. I mean, both are on the real line. But if not, one of them is in the upper half plane, the other is in the lower half plane. So what that means is that hello, it looks like I was thrown out of the meeting. So firstly, maybe I need to share it again. Can you hear me now?
And when the recording also stopped, it said that this recording stopped.
Oh, okay. I have to. Oh, that's no, it's. But it now says it is recording. Okay. Okay, but where did I lose? I mean, the connection at what point? I was saying that this particular one has this solution, and one can argue from here that gamma t must approach one of.
Yeah, you stopped at the arrow. So gamma t tending to a
Okay.
plus 9.
So it converges to one of the roots. When the roots are complex, only one of them is in the upper half plane, it will go to that. So the picture is like this. So this gamma t picture is like this. It starts at maybe 1, and then when c is less than 0, one of the roots is in the upper half plane, and it will kind of converge to that, spiraling around it infinitely many times. This is what happens. And when c is bigger than 4, less than c is greater than equal to 4, then the two roots are on the upper half plane. It converges to one of them. I don't whichever one. It will be something like this. So that is the difference in behavior. When c is less than 4, it does not hit the real line. The gamma stays in the upper half plane, open upper half plane. Here gamma hits the real line, and that makes all the difference. So why? I mean, so what does that? What difference does it make? So why spend time on a particular example like this? So there is a nice result which one can derive more or less directly from here. It is this is a result from multiple papers. So first was Marshall and Rode, and then Joan Lind. I think she was maybe a student of Stephen Rode or something at that time. So they proved the following results. Okay, so if U is, it's a very deterministic result. If U is a Holder half curve, if U is a Holder half curve, with c less than 4, then gamma is simple. Okay, gamma is the corresponding Loebner thing. There's a curve, and okay, I should say the hulls are actually generated by a curve, and that curve is simple. And with c equal to 4, there exist counterexamples. In fact, the example that I showed you last time, which was this spiral, you have the curve here goes and spirals around this set, and then spirals back and goes back to infinity. That is generated by a U. This is what I said, but it is not a curve. So this whole thing is not a curve. The two components are curves, but overall it's not a curve. This is the driving function for this is in fact Holder half with maybe equal to 4 or something like that. So I don't know that exactly, but a counterexample like that exists. Okay, so it is exactly like that. Here I have not made precise what the set is and what the curves are. They take some specific logarithmic spirals and do it. So that's the counterexample part. But the positive side is that if you have Holder half with the constant less than 4, then you get a simple curve. Okay, and this you can get from the previous example actually. So this Joan Lind gave a proof, but then she says she attributes that Schramm gave this idea. You can do it by comparison with this. Okay, maybe I don't want to spend time with this. So this one can be done. Or maybe there is a point I will tell it because that is I will use something here. Example, by comparison. What do I mean by comparison? So if you see, suppose there are two driving functions. So let's say, or rather suppose, so the claim is that gamma is simple. Okay. So I say that this follows from another claim, which is a point which will occur again. So maybe it is worth paying attention to, that this curve driven by this U is simple is also, it can be derived from the fact that gamma does not hit the real line. Okay, it being simple and it not hitting real line the same for, I mean, so this is implied by that. The main point is that once you have developed the, so why is that? So if, why does that imply that? Suppose it comes and hits, so let's say here is some time t, and after that it comes and hits itself at some later time t. We know that if you map it by g sub t, what you get is a picture like this. And what happens, everything up to that time is mapped into the real line, right? Gamma 0 to up to time t is mapped onto the real line. And the future of the curve is something that comes out like this. And where does it hit? This part is now on the real line. It hits somewhere on the real line and goes like this. So this is gamma tilde, which is gt of gamma, okay, of gamma t to infinity. Okay, and we know that, we saw this in the first lecture, that gamma tilde is driven by u tilde, which is just u of t plus t. Okay, or if you translate it to the origin, I would have to subtract u of t, but it is just driven by this. So if u is a curve of Holder half with a small constant, then u tilde is also a Holder curve of half with the same Holder constant. So if you show that it doesn't hit real line, this cannot hit real line, means this cannot hit itself. So that is the reason why this is implied by this. So the point is to prove this claim. So the proof of this second claim is by comparison. So suppose it hits. Some x in the real line, let's, without loss of generality, say it is positive. So it hits some x on the real line. That means if you started the process at x, I mean gt of x, that is hit in finite time. It gets absorbed in finite time. Now the point is, so let's say we have, suppose this happens at some time t. That t is this tx. So up to that point, we have the curve, which is u is some curve, which is a Holder half curve, and maybe this is how it hits. So this is u of capital T equal to gt of x, right? So x is absorbed at that time. Now what you do is you compare it to a Holder half curve with the same constant. So let's take a Holder half curve like this. So this is v of t, which is u of t minus c square root of capital T minus small t. Okay, this is a Holder half curve which is below that. You see, this is going to be below that. So the main point is the usual comparison in ODEs, right? I mean, so you can show that by comparison that. So this is v of 0, this is u of 0, which is 0, and x is somewhere here. That so let's say, okay, gt is satisfying with and let's say ht is the one with driving function v. So can show by comparison that what happens is that x is also absorbed by so we what I want to say is that it is always true that ht of x is going to lie below gt of x. Okay, but as t goes to t, this is gt of x, which is actually u of t, which is also equal to v of t. And ht of x is always greater than equal to v of t. You are starting to the right of v of 0, so you will always be to the right. Okay. So you get ht of time ht of x will be greater than equal to v of t. Okay, so this is the comparison, but because equality, this means that the curve generated by h hits x. But this example shows that when the constant is less than 4, it doesn't hit the real line. It is a logarithmic spiral. So that's why Holder 1/2 curves don't hit the real line and hence are also non-self-intersecting. Okay, any questions or anything about this?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Can I ask?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand. You said that the curve for the Brownian motion is WT.
Huh.
This is almost a Holder half curve. So is there a, way to see that right now?
Which one? Sorry,
the curve for WT.
Oh, the W. Okay, so W,
Yeah.
So this is a fact. In fact, it is Holder 1/2 minus epsilon for every epsilon. It is okay. So main point, the main point is that expectation WT plus H minus WT squared is H. So in this average sense, see, WT plus H minus WT is a Gaussian random variable with variance H. That's definition of Brownian motion. So the square has expectation H. So in that sense, already you see that it is somehow the differences are of the order of square root of H.
Right.
So, but if you want in a pathwise sense, is it actually Holder half? It's not Holder half. It is Holder half minus epsilon for every epsilon. But not it is not Holder half. Let's put it that way. It's not a Holder half function, but it is Holder half minus epsilon for every epsilon. That requires some proof. It's not that easy. But here, you more or less the intuition is here that the square is of the order of H. So the differences are of order square root of H. That's all.
Okay. And second was about the SLE curve gamma itself.
Yes.
So I think in proving the claim, we assume that it's also Holder half, right?
Yeah. This is not going to apply. That is the point. So this theorem is not enough to say that SLE kappa is a curve. This only works for C less than 4. Anyway, this. Okay, by the way, this 4, I don't know if it is even comparable to that 4 which occurs there. So it's a tricky point. But anyway, from these things we cannot. Okay, by the way, what this implies is that if you have Holder with an exponent bigger than half. Okay, so from this, that's actually easier. If you have any Holder function with half plus epsilon, okay, then it is it generates a simple curve. But those things are not going to help in showing that SLE itself is a curve generated by a curve. For that, one has to go to this other explanation, so to speak, explanation I gave, that when it starts to go into itself, it will be driven out due to there are some probabilistic considerations there. Okay, so yeah, these deterministic things do not imply that one.
Okay, and I was just discussing with Badarka also. So, so what can we say about the regularity? Let's say if you think about approximating SLE curves, SLE K with these Holder curves, then for K very small, are they very regular in some sense, and for K greater?
Yeah, so another theorem I had mentioned last time, no way I'm going to even, I don't even know the proof, let's say. The Hausdorff dimension of SLE kappa curve. Okay, the curve. I mean the curve, not the filling in. If you fill in, of course, you will get 2. That's not the point. So you take the curve, this curve, then it is 1 plus 2 over kappa if kappa is less than 8. And for kappa greater than equal to 8, it is going to be 2 because it's space filling. It will be 2. It will fill out the whole thing. So when kappa is, oh, sorry, what did I do? Sorry, sorry, I wrote some nonsense. It's not 1 plus 2 over kappa. It is 1 plus kappa over 8. Okay, when kappa is close to 0, this is like a smooth curve, dimension 1. And then the Hausdorff dimension starts increasing all the way up to 8, after which it is space filling, so its dimension is 2. Does this answer your question? This is one kind of regularity, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Kappa equal to 0 is the straight vertical line. That's the thing. That's a smooth curve. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So what I want to do now, I mean, so this was, I just mentioned this to give an idea, and also the deterministic thing may be interesting to some people. I said that the deterministic results don't imply this SLE thing, but that is the type of thing that is kind of attempted in what is called these rough paths and so on. Again, Atul Shekhar is the right person to ask this type of questions, if at some point you get him for a seminar. But I will just go on now how we get this. So what I have not done yet is how to do any computations using SLE. Okay, so you don't need to, everything before you can forget. So SLE is defined like this. What we have is that if you fix Z, then GT of Z is satisfying a differential equation. But this gamma is defined in a kind of indirect way, right? Okay, so maybe I should also explain one not particularly useful maybe, but an intuitive point here. Or maybe a useful thing to think. The gamma itself is not directly defined. It is defined in a very indirect way. The flow lines of starting from any Z, we know they are nice. They are satisfied this ODE, but then you have to take all those Zs for which the flow lines end before time t, and those Zs will form gamma 0 to t, right? So roughly speaking, that Z which gets absorbed exactly at time t, that is gamma of t. But how do you think of it? I mean, one way to think of it maybe just for intuitive purposes is the following. You look at the reverse flow. This is just, I'm just making a point that you look at the reverse flow, which is, I had written in the first lecture, ft dot of Z is, or maybe I just go there. It must be written somewhere. Yeah, where is the reverse flow? If you look at, so the intuition I'm saying doesn't matter. Ft dot of Z is minus 2 over Ft of Z minus Ut. Okay, it's a reverse flow. What we said was that the integral lines are upward. The imaginary part is increasing. Okay, you can start from anywhere except U of 0, right? So you will have some, okay, if you start on the real line, it will stay in the real line. Okay, so you will have flow lines like this. So in some sense, what is gamma of gamma? Okay, assuming it's a curve or even more general set. In some sense, what is left out by all these curves, that is gamma. So you may think of it as some regularized version of a solution starting at U of 0. If I can start the reverse flow starting at U of 0, that is gamma. In some so I don't know if that is of any use for any actual calculations, but it is one way to think. The gamma is what comes if you start at U0, which is of course not well defined. You have to make sense of it, and the making sense of it, one way is that you take all the other flows and what is remaining is this gamma. So that is like that. It's similar for, I mean, even in the deterministic case. So SLE is like that. Okay, how do we handle these things? So here, what is the basic tool to handle these type of things? Okay, so I will say that, okay, so let me state the result in a different way. So it will be implied by studying the following. So as I said, we can understand flow starting from a point. How do we understand this? Okay, so here is the fact or theorem. Let's say the theorem. I'll state a more elaborate theorem. Fix 0 less than x less than y. Okay, and also fix a kappa. So we are working with SLE kappa. So let so Tx, Ty be the times of absorption. Right. So these are the times of absorption starting from X and Y. So this is the first time gt of x is actually u of equal to u of t. For me, u of t is square root kappa times Brownian motion. So what are the facts? Fact 1, if kappa is less than equal to 4, then Tx is infinity with probability 1. Okay, with probability 1. So it will never be absorbed. Whatever x you take, it will never be absorbed. And if kappa is between 4 and 8, then it is finite. Tx finite, of course, Ty, Tx, Ty are all finite, both are finite with probability 1, but probability Tx equal to Ty is less than 1. Okay, I will come to what that means. So the probability that they are both absorbed at the same time is actually less than 1, which now you will see if kappa is greater than equal to 8, then this is all finite, of course, Tx. So probability that Tx less than Ty less than infinity is actually 1. So they are actually both are finite and also distinct with probability 1. That's what I mean. So to just write it. Yeah, okay. So let's leave it like this. So what do these things mean? So these things, because of what I will mention now, what these things will mean is precisely these facts that I said here. Okay, so this will imply that gamma is SLE kappa is simple for kappa less than equal to 4. This will imply that SLE kappa is actually hits itself, hits real line, hence itself, but is not space filling. This one implies that the SLE kappa is space filling in this regime. Okay. So why would such a thing be implied? What is the meaning of this? Okay, so what can happen? So just imagine a curve which is going like this. Suppose, so if it's simple, we understand. Okay, simple will look like this. But what if it hits itself and so on? Okay, so when it comes back and hits itself or the real line, so let's say if it hits itself, then all these points get absorbed at that time, right? And let's say it comes like this and hits here. All these points get absorbed at that time. So let me just do one more picture. So just suppose you imagine a curve comes and hits like this. So gamma is like this, and at gamma time t hits some point x. So if it is like this and then it proceeds, you see that for all, or let me call it y. So now you see that Ty equal to Tx equal to T for all x in 0 to y. All these points are absorbed at the same time. A moment before, when it had not hit that, so when at this point, gamma is still a simple curve and none of these points have been, nothing in the real line has been absorbed. Okay. But when it hits this, all the points inside also get absorbed. In particular, all these get absorbed. So Tx is equal to Ty in such a situation. So what does it mean that Tx is less than Ty? So if x is here and y is here, So Tx less than Ty means it should have hit somewhere in between before absorbing y. It can absorb y, but not before absorbing, after absorbing x. So at this point, x was already absorbed, and then y has to be absorbed. Okay. Is that okay? But now this has to happen for all x and y. Let's say this is written for a fixed x and y with probability 1, but you can take the intersection over all xy rational. To really interpret it, take intersection over x less than y and xy in rational, and also the other side. I mean, you can also take 0. I mean, by symmetry, it is the other side, all those. So for every pair of rational numbers, Tx has to be less than Ty. What does that mean? That means x is here. For every rational, it has to be, so every rational y bigger than x has to, I mean, x has to be hit before y for every rational. So the only way it can do that is actually hit everything. I mean, so before it absorbs something like this, it must have hit all these points actually. So that is how it becomes space filling. Okay, so that's the intuition, how these times have to do with the properties of gamma. Not every property of gamma is so easily transferred to the flow lines and their something absorption time. So this is a particular one which can be easily transferred. Any questions, comments on this? Okay, so maybe I just indicate then the proof of this, the main technique, because this technique is the one that keeps repeating again and again. Okay, I mean, so sorry, I must ask because I don't know. I mean, so how many here don't know the gambler's ruin problem? I mean, is there anyone who has not seen the gambler's ruin problem for Brownian motion?
Maybe quickly say something, because there are people who have not really gone through ISI.
Well, one can get ruined outside too, but but okay, let's do it. Yeah. So gambler's ruin problem, this is the kind of problem, this is very much like the problem that we will consider, that's why, but this is a simple one just for Brownian motion. Okay, so Brownian motion, so let's take 2 points. Let's say this is minus a and this is plus b, and you run the Brownian motion till it hits. So this is Brownian motion, and then tau is the first time. Is a or b. Sorry, I meant to say minus a or b. Or maybe I just change this to a. A is negative, b is positive. Okay. So what's the so you run it till it hits a or b. So it can happen by either end by hitting b, or it can end by hitting a. Two possibilities are there. Now it's the interpretation why it's called gambler's ruin problem. Is that so I start with A rupees and you start with B rupees, and then we keep gambling. This is supposed to be, as the gambling goes, so let's say you are keeping track of my profit. Okay, my profit is to start with, profit is 0. Maybe if I am winning, this Brownian motion indicates my profit. So I keep going up. If I hit B, basically I made a profit of B, means you are bankrupt and the game ends. Or I hit minus A, in which case I lost all my money to you and you win. So question is, what's the two probabilities? Okay, so the main question here is, what's the probability W tau is B, which is actually 1 minus probability W tau is A. It will be one or the other. One can easily show that it has to hit either A or B, and then which of them it is. So the type of argument that will come again and again is the following. So it is using Martingale. So we will use that. So what is martingale? If you look at expectation of WT given everything that happened up to time S. So suppose I tell you give you an initial segment of the path. So this is time S, and so up to time S you have seen. So now what is expected WT given this? Okay, so that is the question. So in this case, since it is Brownian motion, so this is always WS. Okay, so this is WS. So this is the tricky part. I mean, this is the technical part which is always tricky. So, and highly questionable part, whether you can do it at a stopping time. Okay. So in particular, okay, so maybe an even simpler, this is what a martingale means. In particular, okay, in particular expectation WT is 0, because you condition on nothing up to time 0, then you get W0, which is 0. Okay. So the questionable part, which always needs some justification, is whether you can do it at a stopping time, like tau. Can I say that expectation at W tau is also 0? Okay. If accepted, if yes, then that solves our problem. Why? Because at expectation W tau is, it's either B with probability. So let's call this probability P. Okay. So B with probability P. Plus A with probability 1 minus P. So if you do this, then you see that P is what? P is B minus A here is minus A over B minus A. So it is proportional to the length. Probability that you hit B is proportional to this length. Okay, so if I come with half as much money as you have, then you have 2/3 chance of winning or something like that. So, right, so that is what you get. So this is how you solve it. So this is the way we will analyze this problem also. So, but except that instead of fitting for Brownian motion, we have to look for a more complicated quantity. Okay. So what is the more complicated quantity? We will do the Gambler's Green, but for a more complicated quantity, which is, so fix an X and define xt to be gt of x minus ut, whether ut is square root kappa wt. Let's also divide by square root kappa. Just that makes things little cleaner, that's all. So that's not a big deal, but gtx minus ut with x0 equal to, at time 0, where are we? At time 0, this g0 of x is x, and this is 0. u0 is 0, so it is x over square root kappa, which is a positive number. Okay, maybe I could have made gt of x root kappa, but okay, it's not a big deal. Let's leave it like that. So it starts at that point. Okay, so what we ask is, the question that we ask is exactly the same question. So the question we ask is, so fix, so here is x over root kappa. Okay, so that's where xt starts, and 0 is here, and let's fix some two numbers. This number is called delta and this number m. So basically delta I will send to 0 and m I will send to infinity later. But first we start with two finite numbers, non-zero numbers, delta and m. Okay, delta is strictly positive and m is finite. So, and I ask, what is the probability that x, so let's introduce the stopping time. Let tau be the first time when xt becomes equal to delta or equal to m. It hits either this side or that side. Okay, so I have fixed two targets, delta or m. You have to figure out which one it will hit. I mean, it will hit one of the two. With what probabilities it will hit go to the lower side, and with what probabilities it will go to the upper side. So what we want is P, which is probability that x tau is equal to let's say m. Okay, one of the two. You can take either of them. Let's say P, so which is equal to 1 minus probability that x tau is equal to delta. It won't stay bounded here. Okay, those things require some justification, but if you don't know them, you should hardly worry about that at the moment. Okay, so this is exactly the analog of this, except our process is more complicated. Okay, X is not a martingale. How are you going to, X itself is not Brownian motion. It's a more complicated one. This, if we didn't have this, if we had just square root kappa Wt over square root kappa, that would be back to this problem. But we have this gt of x, which is somehow a complicated thing. So how are we going to handle this? This is where one needs to use Ito calculus. Okay, so we need to find a martingale. X is not a martingale. The point is, okay, so maybe I make a claim because again, Ito calculus may be something that is not necessarily familiar. So I will separate the two parts. So let me just write down something is a martingale. Not X is not a martingale, but I will just look up what is it. Okay, so xt to the power 1 minus 2 over kappa. X is not going to be a martingale, but this is a martingale. So this only works for kappa not equal to 4. For kappa equal to 4, ignore that point. Okay, so let's not worry about that, because that power becomes 0. It is meaningless. Okay, so xt to the power 0 is 1. So it's meaningless. So there, instead of a power, you will have a log. Okay, so basically you will have to consider a log, but just let's keep it simple. Let's not worry about what happens at kappa equal to 4 and justify it below 4 and above 4. That's enough to understand. But once you have this, assuming the claim, we can continue. Assuming the claim, and this type of thing. What is the name for this is optional sampling theorem in probability. The point is you are in a gambling game. Okay, so you are in a casino and you keep gambling. Each game is fair. So if you say that I will play 100 games and come out, then your expected profit is 0. Okay, but can you do something, some trickery by which you can make a expected positive profit? Is it possible? There are two ways you can do that. One is if you can see the future, then you can do that. You just stop before you lose big time. Okay, that is the dream of all gamblers, but that requires some foresight. That's where this stopping times comes. The times like tau are things which do not see the future. So it is the first time you hit delta or m that you do not need to see the future trajectory to know whether the trajectory has already hit delta or m. Such things are called stopping times. But even a stopping time is not enough to ensure this kind of thing. So for example, what I can do is, let's say you are betting on a Brownian motion. I start gambling and I say that, well, I'll keep playing till I make 1 rupee profit and then I will leave. That is a sure way to make profit, because you can show that Brownian motion will hit 1 at some time and then you make profit. So this is a sure way to make profit. In this case, expectation W tau is actually 1, which is not equal to 0. Okay, so you have a scheme by which you can make profit, but this has the unreasonable assumption that you have infinite amount of money, that you can go as much as you want on the lower side. But that's not true. As long as you introduce a realistic thing of putting a bounded interval, then this optional sampling condition is restored. Okay, so I don't want to get into more of that, but that is what is required to make, if you put a realistic assumption that I have only 1 million rupees, then it's no problem. So I will have to either stop when I lose this much or get 1 rupee, and then it will be restored and you will still make a 0 profit on average. So it is similar here. That's why I didn't directly take delta equal to 0 and m equal to infinity. Those things become tricky. If you fix delta positive and m finite, you can argue this. So you can argue that x tau to the 1 minus 2 over kappa, since this is a martingale, it is the same as at time 0. X0 to the 1 minus 2 over kappa, which is basically this number, whatever. This x over square root kappa, maybe I give it a name. Okay, what shall I give it? Yeah, okay, so let's call it x bar. Okay, so divide by square root kappa, let's call it x bar to the 1 minus 2 over kappa. Okay, so but then once you have this, we can play a game exactly like this. So this is what? This is m to the, if this stopping time happens by hitting on the upper side, then this is m to the 1 minus 2 over kappa times p, that's the probability. Or maybe you hit on the lower side, that probability is 1 minus p times delta to the 1 minus 2 over kappa. So what is p then? We can work out p. P will be p into this minus this is equal to this. Okay, so you get x to the x bar to the 1 minus, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so this is correct. X bar to the 1 minus 2 over kappa minus delta to the 1 minus 2 over kappa. Maybe it would have been better if I had given that name. Maybe we do that. So let's just call 1 minus 2 over kappa as alpha. Okay, so alpha is 1 minus 2 over kappa. So then this is x bar to the alpha minus delta to the alpha over m to the alpha minus delta to the alpha. So this is what we get. So much depends. So now what happens is, so what we are interested in is whether I will ever hit 0 before any m. So what we are interested really in, so probability, for example, that x ever hits 0. Why do I care for this? This is same as probability Tx is finite, right? So what is x? X is GTx minus ut. So x hitting 0 is same as small x getting absorbed. That is T sub x being finite. That's what I'm interested in. Is T sub x finite or not? The absorption time. So probability x ever hits 0 is the same as limit as delta goes to 0 and m goes to infinity of probability of
It's
this
4 o'clock.
Of this probability. Let me just write p, this quantity, right? So that now depends. So what happens? So you have different situations. So one is possibly, so what happens when alpha, so it depends on whether alpha is positive or negative. Okay, so let's say alpha is negative, which is same as what is alpha negative? That means 1 minus 2 over kappa is negative, means kappa, oh, something is fishy. It should have been 1 minus 4 over kappa, I think. Yeah, hold on. Maybe I got the wrong exponent. Just sorry about this. 1 second. Yeah, it should be 1 minus 4 over kappa. I made a mistake here. So, yeah, so this should be 1 minus 4 over kappa. Okay, first let's see what happens when alpha less than 0. Then I will adjust it. If alpha is less than 0, what happens as delta goes to 0 and m goes to infinity? If alpha is negative, so you know that delta is less than x bar is less than m. Okay. So that is the picture. Delta is below x bar, which is this is x bar, and less than m. Yeah, if alpha is negative, m to the alpha goes to 0 because m goes to infinity. Delta to the alpha goes to infinity. So this ratio goes to 1, I think. P goes to 1. And if alpha is positive, then P, if alpha is positive, then delta, this part goes to 0. And as m goes to infinity, this will go to 0. Okay. So I should have had here, sorry about this. So this whole thing, I made a mistake. So this probably is 4 over kappa. So what that means is that if kappa is less, so 4 over kappa negative means kappa is bigger than 4. If kappa bigger than 4 implies probability goes to 1. That probability Tx is finite is 1. That x will get absorbed, which implies that gamma hits the real line. It absorbs x, right? I mean, if Tx is x is going to be absorbed by gamma, then definitely gamma hits the real line. So whereas if this one alpha positive means kappa is less than 4, implies probability Tx finite is actually 0. So implies gamma does not hit the real line. Okay, this is the way. So the key step is to figure out the martingale, and that is where you need stochastic calculus, or maybe sometimes there are other ways to do it, but this is how you figure out. Okay, any questions here so far?
Yeah, how do you figure out the exponent here?
So that is where, so how did you figure out the martingale? That's your question, right? Where, yeah. So let's see, that will fix this 1 minus 4 over kappa and so on. So how do we find? So that's we will using Ito calculus. So I will write what is Ito formula and maybe give a kind of intuitive explanation. So our xt is gt of x minus square root kappa times Brownian motion divided by square root kappa. Okay. So the question is, how does x behave? Okay. I mean, microscopically, how does x behave? That is what is told by Ito's formula. So let me write Ito's formula and explain what that means. So dxt, according to Ito's formula, is going to be 1 by root kappa gt dot of x dt minus dwt plus so what is sorry, I want a power, right? Sorry, I forgot the power also. So let me do it directly with the power. So if you look at xt to the power alpha, let's figure out what power is good. So dxt to the power alpha, according to Ito's formula, it says the following. I will explain afterwards. So it is alpha x to the alpha minus 1 dxt plus alpha minus 1 by 2 xt to the alpha minus 2. Okay, first I should have done dxt actually. Maybe, yeah. Let me write first what is dxt. Dxt is going to be, it will be gt dot of x over square root kappa dt minus dwt. Okay, and then xt. Okay, what is the meaning of this? Okay, so generally the point is, so you have some, let's say, Brownian motion. Okay, what is Brownian motion? The way to think of it is in a small time h, wt plus h minus wt is normal with mean 0 and variance h, or standard deviation square root of h. That's the same thing. Okay, so that's what Brownian motion is. Suppose you have some, suppose you apply some function to it, f of which maybe even depends on time. So let's say you have some function of time. So then what does it do in a small amount of time? That's what you need to figure out. What is yt of a plus h minus yt? how does it move when you are at some location? How does such a thing move? So if you just try to do Taylor expansion, so then it depends on the derivative of t. So times h, because that is how it moves, plus let's say the x variable. So let's call it the x variable, del xf of t wt times wt plus h minus wt. But that's not all. This is where we come back to this point, which I answered earlier about Brownian motion. Brownian motion, the thing is, so if you are in time h, it moves a distance of square root h, not h. So if you want everything to the order h, so if it was a smooth function of if w was itself a smooth function, this is all we would do. But wt plus h minus wt is order square root h. So there's one more term of order h. If I want everything of order h, then I have to go one more term, which is 1/2 the second derivative of this, and wth plus h minus wt square. So now you have got all terms of order h to first order up to order h. Okay. So what you have to do, I mean, Ito's formula is basically saying that this thing it averages out when you sum over steps. You can write that wt plus h minus wt square is h. Okay, so this is the statement. Okay, so what that means is that yt plus h minus yt is normal with a mean which is equal to del tf plus half del x square. I'm not writing the argument, f times h, because this and this are just deterministic numbers. If you know everything that happened up to time t, how much has it moved? This is the mean. This first term and the third term will give you the mean. And this one, what is this one? This is a Gaussian, this is a normal, but with the mean 0. Mean is 0 because wt plus h minus wt has mean 0, but its variance h is going to be multiplied by the square of this, right? So the standard deviation will be square root h times this one. Okay, so let's say the variance, standard deviation, or let's write variance. Sorry, so let's write variance. Times, then there is no square root, it is times h. Okay, so this is basically Ito's formula. That is the meaning of this actually. So what I have written, if you write it, so it is saying in Ito formula notation, this is saying that del tf plus half del x square f dt plus del xf dwt. This is the meaning. How you should interpret is, this is giving you the drift. In a small time h, it will give you this times h as the mean, and the so it's like a particle moving like Brownian motion, but there is also a force in some direction. Depending on where you are, there may be a force in some direction. That will give you the drift term. And in addition, there is a Brownian motion term, but it's not standard Brownian motion, as in it gets multiplied by some constant. The fluctuation is also multiplied. So that is Ito's formula. So when you carry this out for this kind of function, here we have something which is similar to that. We have a function of time and Brownian motion. And it is actually a little more complicated. This depends on everything that happened up to this time, which is okay still. Okay, GT is not some fixed, it is not a fixed function of time and Brownian motion. It is actually more complicated than this because it depends on everything that happened up to this time. Nevertheless, it's all okay because the past you condition and just do this. So this is basically Ito's formula like that. Okay, so this is saying that xt plus h minus xt will have a mean which is like this times h and a variance which is 1. Okay, 1 times h. And now if you raise it to a power alpha, what will happen? Well, you further get the similar thing. So you will get, so which becomes, you plug this in, so you will get basically alpha times, so gt dot of x is actually, well, you see gt dot of x is 2 over gt of x minus square root kappa wt, right? So which is, yeah, what is that? It is basically 1 over xt almost. So what do we get? Actually 2, so let me write here, xt to the alpha minus 1. So dxt is actually, okay, maybe I write it here, gt dot of x over square root kappa will make it, if I put another square root kappa here, 2 over kappa xt dt minus dwt. That is the meaning. So its mean will be given by this drift term and the variance by this. So here I get another 2 over kappa xt. So let's put 2 over kappa here, and I have 1 over xt. So xt to the minus alpha t dt, and then minus dwt is there, and then plus, sorry, this will have a dt here. This is a dt plus alpha into alpha minus 1 over 2 xt to the alpha minus 2 dt. So if you combine the drift terms, what we will get is 2 alpha over kappa plus alpha into alpha minus 1 by 2 into xt to the alpha minus 2 dt minus dwt. Okay, so this is how you understand is xt to the alpha is moving like this. xt plus h to the alpha minus xt to the alpha has mean h into this term and variance h into the coefficient here, which is 1. That is what it means. Is this okay? I mean, I assume that people don't know, maybe everyone doesn't know stochastic calculus, so I explained this part. So what is it? So we want a martingale. What is a martingale? Martingale means it should have, given everything that happened, what happens in a short time now, should have 0 mean. To get a martingale, you have to set drift equal to 0. So this is the drift. Drift means mean. Because martingale means everything up to, if whatever happened up to now, if after some time I see what is the expected value, it should be my current value. So it's not biased in any particular direction. Now, if it did have a drift in some direction, there would be a bias, right? So to get a martingale, so these are not generally martingales. To get a martingale, you have to set the mean to 0. So that means you have to set 2 alpha over kappa equal to minus alpha into alpha minus 1 over 2, which makes it alpha cancel. So 4 over kappa, sorry, yeah, alpha equal to 1 minus 4 over kappa. That's how you get this. So that's how this power came. So you always do this Ito formula and set the drift term equal to 0. That's how you get a martingale. And then once you have a martingale, you can get this.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So now, so this solves this problem actually. So we have solved this and this. So Tx is infinity and Tx less than Ty equal, I mean, sorry, not this one. We showed that Tx is finite. Similarly, one can do this one and this one, which I will not do now. Okay. So for Tx equal to Ty and Tx, what's the probability Tx equal to Ty or Tx less than Ty? One can do those things also. But I don't want to do that now. There are other problems like this one can do. I'll just mention one and then stop, because so what is the, so yeah, so because I so another problem like this.
Manju, just one thing. Is there something special about the nature of this u of t which you use in the Loevner equation, for which you get this G sub T, in the sense that if it is just, let's say you have say paths going, I mean, so the general thing is say paths from the real line going into the upper half plane following some law. Okay. And so basically say the random component of that suppose is Brownian motion, and then you have a drift term. Is it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are looking at, sorry, your curve is itself in the upper half plane, it's Brownian motion plus maybe something. Okay, something like this, let's say. Okay.
Yeah, so basically there's another drift term which could be deterministic, could be random. The point is it could I mean, just trying to sort of abstract out the qualitative features of SLE and then trying to see what is the general setup. So suppose it is allowed to come and hit the real line again, and then it moves back.
Okay.
Yeah, you sort of impose enough conditions so that some basic qualitative features of SLE are followed.
Okay. Yes.
So is it? I mean, so what is this? What is the general philosophy of converting, say, a random motion, say, with drift, into a martingale? I mean, so.
That's what. So if you have any, so.
Okay. I mean, is it enough to? Yeah, there was some point in your proof where you converted the mean to 0 by normalizing, right?
By choosing the function. Yeah. So in general, you choose a function so that it becomes a martingale.
Correct. So firstly, I mean, this function is supposed to be the change of what, mean with time, or what is it?
So we can consider any function like this. For example, if you want of Brownian motion itself.
Yes.
So you can look at f of t times wt, for example. It is more general than just a function of time. When will this be a martingale? If I ask that, so this y is a martingale. Technically, I should call it a local martingale because sometimes it's not exactly it's kind of a martingale. Okay, if and only if this del t f plus half del square f equal to 0. So this is the condition for this specific problem. If you take a function of time and Brownian motion, that will be a martingale if and only if satisfies this. This, you see, is very closely like the heat equation. There is a change of sign.
Yeah.
So it's like the adjoint of the heat equation or something like that. So
okay. So here's the thing. I mean, the point is that so what you've done here is essentially you've looked at the infinitesimal generator of Brownian motion. I mean, that's what's fitting into the second term there, right? That del square. I mean.
This, yes. Yeah. So this is this whole, right.
Okay. So which means basically if you have, say, a general stochastic process, so say not necessarily, and you have, say, some infinitesimal generator, there should be some analogous condition like this which will convert it into a martingale. Is there some general?
Not from anything. If it's already a martingale, so if you start with a martingale.
Yes.
Continuous martingale. Let's say. Means continuous martingale. Let's give it some name. MT. Let's say.
Yeah.
And I want to look at, let's say, f of t MT.
Yes.
When will it be a martingale? This is your question, sort of.
Yeah,
right?
That's correct.
Okay. So first fact one that we should know is what is the important thing about MT. So there exists a process AT, which is an increasing process. It's random but increasing, such that MT square minus AT is a martingale.
I see.
So that is very important. This is called the quadratic variation process of the prof M. So you can find an increasing process such that this is true. MT square itself is going to be not a martingale. The square of a martingale is very unlikely to be a martingale. So you can subtract an increasing process such that it's a martingale. Example, when it is WT square minus T is martingale.
I see.
Now Ito's formula tells you Ito's formula tells, if I take a function of t and mt, let's call it yt, suppose. Then the infinitesimal moment of y is going to be del t f as before, plus, what is that? Yeah, how should I write it? Now I am confused. So it is, if I say like this, dyt is del t f plus, right, okay. So dt, okay, sorry, no, it is okay. So I think I can write it. So someone who knows can correct me if I make a mistake here. So del t f, this is one of the things with a drift.
Yeah.
But there is also this second derivative term like before. I mean, so this is not of t, but of t and mt. Okay, so del square f times dat. This is also a kind of dat is a well-defined thing. And then there is a Brownian component, which is just del x f dmt. So this is, so if you want it to make it martingale, you have to make sure this is 0.
Okay.
Y is a martingale. So this is what happened. If you want, in some sense, we did this. This x was my intermediate process. This x is like your some process. It's not even a martingale. It's a martingale plus something. X is a martingale here. Wt. I mean, that's a martingale part plus something else. And we took a function of x and we did Ito's formula. That's the first step. In the first step, this is what I did, kind of. There is a dxt part, because this didn't explicitly depend on xt to the alpha, doesn't have a t dependence. There is no del t term here. So there was a dxt term. If you compare to this mt, function of time and martingale, I had only a function of martingale, namely mt to the alpha. Mt to the alpha will be exactly this. If I write mt to the alpha mt to the alpha minus 1 dmt plus this d, not dt, but d of, okay, maybe so in general, he will have the quadratic variation of m. But here it turns out that x quadratic variation is already dt, because the Brownian motion has nothing else. Okay, so this is the point.
But so I guess the point is you do this. I mean this subtraction. I mean this is not what I was calling normalization. It's enough to do it up to second order. That's the point.
Yeah. So all martingales are pretty much like Brownian motion, meaning that they are actually Holder half type things actually. So ultimately, there is even in one dimension, there is even a theorem that any martingale you can do a time change and make it Brownian motion. So that's in one dimension, but all martingales will behave like that. Continuous martingales. Continuous martingales will behave like that.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks.
So that is how this calculation is done. Yeah. So the problems that I was stating, I'll just tell you the problems and not do it. So other problems like this that are interesting, which one can solve, like you have gamma is SLE kappa. And you ask, so let's say one of them that we already, what's the probability tx less than ty? We said that it is less than 1 or equal to 1 depending on kappa bigger than. So here we can take kappa between 4 and 1, 4 and 8, and this type of question, or you can take them on two sides. So these problems turn out to be important and they give a lot of indication. But anyway, I cannot do it now, so I won't do it. But so what I want to ask Mohan, so actually we thought 3 lectures. So this is, I didn't get to the discrete problems. What I
exactly. So you're on next week.
So one point I wanted to say was for the discrete ones, there are better people. Actually, Shubhajit and Vidhi.
No, see, we don't believe in the exclusive or.
Okay, so okay, I'm happy to see your inclusiveness, and okay, I'll.
Okay, just one thing before, I mean, this is since you sort of broached this, actually, this is something that was bothering me while you were talking.
Huh,
So here is the thing. See, you started off with this lattice where, so you have this bunch of squares, and then the squares reduce half in size, essentially according to the hyperbolic metric.
yeah.
It's a discretized version, and then you sort of, yeah, stuff goes off down to the real axis, right?
Huh.
So is there a version of SLE where the trajectories are allowed not, so these are not continuous, but you are allowed only paths, so it's easier to look at it from the inside out, so that paths are only, I mean, if you look at the origin, I mean, so invert it in time, look at the time at which it stops, and then the paths only follow these the boundaries of these squares and then exit, and then you look at it in reverse and you've got your time. Yeah, so can SLE be approximated? I mean, is there a law for this guy which approximates genuine SLE? I mean, essentially, yeah, it's basically trying to discretize SLE, but using a fixed discretization of the background of the hyperbolic plane.
So, but then what do you mean approaches SLE? I mean, it doesn't actually approach SLE, right? What, I mean, what is...
As say the mesh goes to zero.
Okay, you still... yeah, I have never... I see. Actually, I do not know. I mean, it's a good question, but I don't know if this type of discretization goes well. It doesn't go well with Loeffler evolution, at least.
Oh, I see.
That's the problem. I mean, so Loeffler evolution, it goes well. I mean, so example, we saw that square root curve, it gives rise to a straight line. But if you make it piecewise, then it is going to be not piecewise straight here, but this will be curved, right?
Yeah.
So similar, but you are kind of starting the other way. You are taking some lattice like path, whatever.
Correct.
And I have not seen such a thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Not with this hyperbolic lattice, but lot of the probability things are of that nature, of discrete paths, not with this hyperbolic type. I mean, not with the Whitney squares, but with a normal tiling of the Euclidean plane. So you let's say you have Z2 lattice.
Yeah.
And there is some random process which determines a certain path.
Yeah.
So if I am speaking next time, then I will give examples of this. So for example, from percolation, this was one of the things that Shram did. So you can tease out a particular path. You can somehow put some boundary conditions here, and tease out one path. You can do it in many things. So one of them, percolation. There are many other random paths of this nature. And the question is, as delta goes to 0, where delta is the mesh size, what happens to this curve? This is the question Shram was answering, and the answer is that it is SLE. But I mean, at least it's known only in even today. It is known only in a small number of cases, not like as much as is expected. But this is known. But with those Whitney squares, I don't know. That kind of discretization I have not seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I mean, the reason I was asking is basically that the Whitney squares, sort of from the intrinsic hyperbolic geometry point of view, that's the discretization that one would be looking at. Through the uniformization. Whereas, okay.
Somehow in the probability side, it is the appearance of So this appearance of anything conformally invariant is the big surprising and non-trivial part. I mean, so we start with some random process. It doesn't have any conformal invariant. I mean, we don't know what it has, but for some reason, many of these models in the limit have this conformal invariant. So the appearance of hyperbolic geometry, anything of this nature, is itself
I see.
Surprise, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Manju.
Sure.
So, but this coming week we are meeting on Friday as usual.
Yeah. So that's fine. So yesterday was the only issue. So next Friday is okay.
Great. Terrific.
Okay, I will finish whatever I can do next. I will try to wrap it up next week. Okay?
Okay.
After that, Shubhajit can
Yeah.
take over.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks. So, are there any other questions, or is it okay if I close the? I mean, shall I close the meeting?